analysing how D.H.Lawrence links real people into his short story The Virgin and the Gipsy. D.H.Lawrence died in March 1930, beginning his posthumous publications. The Virgin and the Gipsy, written in Italy and discovered in France in that same year, dealt with, as always, themes of explicit sexuality and morality. The story surrounds a young woman living in the English countryside who is desperate to live an exciting life outside her hometown. In a bid for an adventure, she meets a handsome male nomad living a completely different lifestyle to her, which excites her and terrifies her all the same. Lawrence was exceptionally well known for embedding his relationships into his work, using real people's personalities and characteristics to create intriguing stories. And with this comes many reasons for his failed friendships, making his controversial status even more explicit. Lawrence was unapologetic when it came to his work. In his 1925 essay, called Morality in the Novel, he wrote,
"You cannot weigh, nor measure, nor even describe the vision on the canvas. It exists, to tell the truth, only in the much debated fourth dimension. In dimensional space, it has no existence."
Perhaps this explains why mixing fiction and fact could be the only authentic way of gaining an audience's attention. By mixing truth with tales, you give the reader something to relate to and want to understand and imagine. Yet, with this novella comes one of the first instances of Lawrence's sympathetic side, because it was the reader's children that compelled him to suppress the publication of The Virgin and the Gipsy, even though he and Frida, as usual, needed the income. The story was far too close to Lawrence's own experiences, and he didn't publish the novel out of respect for Frida and her relationship with her children. So you're all probably wondering, who is it that features in the book? First is the character, the rector, whose wife leaves him and their children for a young and penniless man. The rector turns to religion and chooses to remember her in an idealised manner. Writers and critics suggest that the rector is based on Frida Lawrence's first husband, Ernest Weekly, whom she married in 1899. In literature in the first media age, David Trotter writes,
Lawrence may even intend a dig at Frida's ex-husband, Professor Ernest Weekly, who had already featured as the clergyman fanatically afraid of the unconventional in The Virgin and the Gipsy.
Frida left Ernest and her children for Lawrence in 1912, exactly as the rector's wife did. Lawrence depicts the rector as having
an intense and not very dignified grief, and a wild-eyed, tragic look.
Perhaps this representation, or dig as Trotter writes, was a way for Lawrence to feel superior over Ernest because he was Frida's first husband, whom she had children with. Then there is the character of Yvette, introduced as the more curious and immature daughter of the rector. Yvette is desperate to get out of the rectory and craves love and adventure. With a similar, adventurous tale, alike Frida and Lawrence's, there was another writer who lived a nomadic life and had a desperation to leave her hometown. Catherine Mansfield, a very good friend of Lawrence's, even with their famous arguments, had a strong and platonic friendship that was based around a respect for one another's work and mind. She was a New Zealand writer who wanted to be successful in London. She took on the adventure and travelled worldwide, writing with her husband Murray. To suggest Lawrence uses Mansfield in this novella comes from his history of using her characteristics in previous novels. 20th century journalist Claire Tomlin wrote, Catherine Mansfield's reminiscences of New Zealand probably inspired Lawrence with the lesbian episode in The Rainbow, and she was certainly the model for Gudrun in Women in Love. As well as this, Durock's literary discovery analyses that Lawrence
portrayed aspects of Catherine in several short stories,
including Alvina from The Lost Girl and Annabelle in his play Touch and Go. But perhaps Yvette could represent many of the adventurous women in his life. Frida, for example, ran away with Lawrence and created a completely new life for herself. She didn't go by any rule book or accept any stereotypical life a woman was supposed to live. In a letter dated May 8th, 1912, Lawrence wrote to Weekly discussing Frida's adventurous side as well as their affair.
Mrs. Weekly hates it, but it has had to be. I love your wife and she loves me. I am not frivolous or impertinent. Mrs. Weekly must live largely and abundantly. It is her nature. Mrs. Weekly is afraid of being stunted and not allowed to grow and so live her own life. All women in their natures are like giantesses. They will go on with their own lives.
With this analysis alone comes the beauty of Lawrence's work. We can go round in circles finding representation after representation of who he might have involved in his stories. The biggest thing to take from this would be that Lawrence was a writer who didn't care how anyone saw him or thought of him. And with that, I leave you with this. Instead of chopping yourself down to fit the world, chop the world down to fit yourself.